On the water in the Western Port, about an hour from Melbourne, it doesn't take long to notice the contradictions. Industry and nature are side by side here. Over the decades, they have existed together.
This is a very small area with a very high concentration of migratory birds and endangered birds. The Western Port area, they actually have something like 50% of all the bird species in the entire state.
It's a delicate balance. This wetland is part of the international convention signed in Ramsar, Iran more than 50 years ago to protect bird habitats around the world. Building anything here will have consequences.
Those seagrass beds that are feeding those swans over there, they'd be gone for a start.
This is where Victoria's multi-billion-dollar wind farm ambitions have stumbled at the starting line.
Turbine parts are loaded onto installation ships at a port.
Plans for a huge construction port here to assemble and transport massive towers and blades offshore were rejected by Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek in December. The decision found plans to reclaim land and dredge a large area for ship access would have unacceptable impacts on the ecological character of the Ramsar wetlands.
That was such a relief. So to hear her say that it was really good. It's not that we're opposed to renewable energy, we totally support that. We just want to see it in the right place, and this isn't the right place.
The proposed development here had a footprint of 146 hectares, most of that within the protected Western Port Ramsar wetlands. That included plans for extensive dredging and reclaiming an area of the seabed about the size of 30 cricket grounds to build a wharf 600 meters long and 100 meters wide. Victoria's energy minister says no one in her government saw the decision coming.
It certainly did blindside us, to be honest.
Lily D'Ambrosio says there were numerous conversations between federal and state government departments about Victoria's proposal, but the Commonwealth never gave the state the chance to explain how concerns for the Western Port site could be addressed.
Victoria was not given the opportunity or was not asked to present mitigation measures to the process. So a decision was made without having requested that information.
Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek told 730 the proposal would have had unavoidable and irreversible impacts to internationally protected wetlands. And a spokesman for Federal Energy Minister Chris Bowen told 730 the Albanese government is committed to working with Victoria and other states to create an offshore wind industry in Australia. Our commitment to working with the Victorian government does not and cannot involve any watering down of environmental approvals.
This should have been dealt with in the years that have elapsed since 2017, when Infrastructure Victoria first advised the Victorian government.
Victorian opposition leader John Pasuto says the state government had plenty of warning about environmental concerns in the Western Port. 7 years ago, a state government report recommended against expansion for a container port, citing the possible significant impact on parts of the critical ecosystem.
What I'm more curious about and concerned about is that with many years advanced warning about the environmental challenges, but it's almost like the state Labor government has done nothing in the meantime to deal with them.
For Victoria, there is no plan B when it comes to offshore wind power. It's a vital part of its commitment to generate 95% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2035. Consultant Matt Rennie specializes in helping governments and companies transition to net zero. He believes this holdup could pose problems for Victoria.
When you're talking about something like offshore wind, the absence of supply chains and the ability to construct and maintain what is really a new industry is going to take some years to build. And so any delay that sends a signal that we're not open for business is a real concern.
Wind power is globally competitive, he says, and development here would be much easier if state and federal governments were on the same page when it comes to approving projects.
It's really important when you're sitting from the mindset of a CEO or a board over in Europe, where you don't understand the way in which the Australian legislative and regulatory framework works, to have really clear signalling around that.
The setback for the Western Port plans could open the door for other options, like blustery Berry Beach and Port Anthony in South Gippsland.
We've very much advocated from a council perspective to ensure that our ports have been considered.
Support operations for offshore wind are set to add nearly 1,000 jobs here. A major expansion for a construction port could mean many more.
I think we'll have a really important role to play. It's a large and complex logistical undertaking for both the state and federal governments to plan out an entire new industry.
But despite a seemingly unequivocal decision from the Commonwealth, Victoria's Energy Minister isn't ready to abandon plans to build on the Western Port just yet.
Right now, the Port of Hastings, which is located in Ramsar wetland, is an operating heavy industry port. But we continue to work through this, of course. We remain undeterred.
Victoria isn't giving up, but the federal decision can't be appealed. Those opposed to a wind farm construction port here hope the plan is dead for good.
Do you think going forward there's any way to do this project and have that kind of an impact on this land?
Not with the scale of what they're thinking, I don't think.
There's no way of it, anything that at that sort of level that can actually work here in these wetlands. If you take an ecosystem and you start to mess around with it, then the ecosystem starts to change, and as soon as that happens, things happen all over the place.
For now, they're celebrating a decision that may well mean a key part of Victoria's wind farm strategy will be moved somewhere else.
We've got to celebrate wins, otherwise you get depressed.